This is the weekly rundown show where we're going to talk about the 5 stories that are moving the needle in the Catholic world here in the East United States. This week, we're going to be talking about Catholic terrorism, anti-Catholic terrorism happening from coast to coast. We're then going to cover a global story. The Hagia Sophia in Constantinople has been reclaimed, not by Catholics. Church closures 2.0 already happening. Trendsetters out west. Will it spread to the rest of America? We'll debate it. 4th story up today, mask mania, and the sin of not wearing a mask could end up bringing you into a holding facility, an obscure holding facility in Arkansas. What's going on with that? And then finally, will Bishop Barron ever stay out of the news? I don't think he will. He has to be on this show every single week. Bishop Barron is obliquely in the news this week because Vatican II is being relitigated by every single talking head on the internet. And so, of course, we're going to dive into that as well. This is The Rundown. Let's get started. All right, Steve, they are tearing down statues. They are defiling them. They're being spray painted. They're being chipped away. It's not just like an isolated thing at this point. They've burned down churches on Florida. They burned down a church in LA. It's happening in Canada. How can we interpret these events?
As Brian McClanahan will say, they're Yankee Puritans. You see a lot of puritanical stuff going on right now, right? With the decapitation of Christ statues inside churches, outside statues, Our Lady getting egged, wrote idol on, broken, destroyed. I know a priest said he doesn't publish his sermons anymore because he's scared he might get, even with Marines lining up the back of his church, he doesn't want anything to happen to outside. Basically, it's like a mission church in Western North Carolina. But in Latvia, was it Latvia? I forget the name of it. Latvia,
the one place where they're putting statues up, right?
Yeah, I think it's Latvia, somewhere that way. They put a statue of a nurse in her mask.
You won't believe this.
It's 60
Catholic
foot tall.
statues are coming. We're going to cut to that video now. Catholic statues around the world are coming down, but this statue is going up. Okay, what a joke, Steve.
And people taking photos with it. I mean, it's. By the way, it's white. I mean, we can't have white depictions of Christ and Our Lady, but that thing is.
I thought that was a statue of Karen. I thought they literally enshrined Karen, but then somebody else pointed out that looks like Hillary.
Looks like Hillary going into Epstein's room. I'm here.
Or what's her name, Maxwell? Wearing the mask, you're able to sneak into Maxwell's room at this point, and her life. It's so weird wearing a mask to a bank. Is that not weird?
Well, especially because I always carry a gun, so there I would be with a mask and a gun in the bank.
There was a meme going around about somebody saying, "I'm not going to sell this to you unless you put a mask on." He goes, "If I'm going outside putting a mask on, I ain't paying for this." You got the church, you got the mission out there in California just got burnt to the ground. I don't think they haven't said if there's arson yet, have they? Or have
well, they still haven't said that. They still haven't said that Notre Dame was arson, so I don't expect that they're going to opine on that anytime soon. But the one in Florida is really interesting. I think it's a shared use situation with the Fraternity of St. Peter, and this man drove his truck onto the compound, through the front door, and then through what the article calls an incendiary device. What is an incendiary device? That sounds like a bomb, is what that sounds like.
The dude gets out and throws gasoline and people are there. I mean, first question I had was, what were y'all doing? I mean, maybe you was shocked or anything, but I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think they said there were multiple people inside. They were setting up for mass. This happened on a Saturday morning. I'm just who was there to return fire? I don't know, but not calling them into question at all. Look, if some guy drives my house and sets my house on fire, I don't know how I'm I think I know how I would react, but you never really know.
Mhm.
But this is happening, Ryan, around the country. You're seeing basically iconoclasm happening in real time.
This is how a regime that regularly represses Christianity or Catholicism in particular, like you saw in, say, the Soviet Union, this is more or less how it starts. This is on the beginning end. Or again, like it would be, say, during the French Revolution. In the beginning, it was stuff like this: attacking churches, desecrating statues. Then it got more serious. Then you had clubs of the Jacobin clubs coming out and beating people up during mass, all paid for, by the way, by various agitators who wanted to see all these things happen. You think the king's cousin, it's kind of noted as the Duc d'Égalité, Philip d'Orléans, and I know I'm butchering the French. Sorry, to all the francophones. Um, he literally would have big banquets and pay everybody, and then now go riot and let's bring a little anarchy to everything. Not my kind of anarchy. And so they'd burn things up, destroy whatever, attack priests, kill priests even at certain times. It all escalated to different. We just had Bastille Day, of course, where this very thing happened. What was the Bastille? Well, the actual Bastille prison had this kind of sinister reputation for all the things it might be doing. But when they actually got in there, there were only 6 prisoners, all political prisoners living in relative luxury compared to the people who had just torn this down to liberate them. And they're like, well, you're liberating me? Seriously? I can't stay? They really didn't understand what was going on. So, but then it got propagandized and destroyed. There's like a little model that survives in the Parish National Library, right? But anyway, so that's how it all began. And then the what happens is becomes the official policy to either destroy uh, paintings and art, churches, or repurpose them. And so that what happens is the directory, after they kill the king, they actually pay a fairly competent sculptor named Dojan. Dojan had specialized in refurbishing statues, fixing bas reliefs and sculptures and so many things. So what he does, and he gets his team and together, and they're paid very handsomely for this, to go around to churches and go around, scratching away the cross or any image of Catholic religion, replace it with Masonic and French Revolutionary symbols, such as the
Mhm.
flaming torch, the lantern, or what have you. And you can see this like at Saint Sulpice. If you go to Saint Sulpice in Paris, you look up, you can see where the cross is scraped away from where this angel is, and in its place is a Mason torch, basically. So this is now reason that we have. And again, where they have the chalice, which signifies faith, that's been replaced with an owl, symbol of wisdom, in a very
Uh-huh.
secular way. And so you see things of this sort, unless I'm mistaken which church that had the owl. That might not be Saint Sulpice, just because I'm kind of fuzzy in that. They even get up to the bell tower and they start scratching away and repurposing, Catholic art that's up on the bell tower. That's how dedicated they were. So, and in a certain way, the vandalism of this type of thing, it's not just mere barbaric destruction, it's that too, but it's actually its own form of art, of protest art. Not art in a true and proper sense, but it's its own form of expression with a message, which is, of course, we hate the church. We're going to destroy the church. And that's what all this stuff means all around the country. And as it increases, religion's open season, and you have all the excuses in the world. Oh, them pedophile priests rape kids, right? And so now you have your golden excuse to say, yeah,
Mhm.
see, the church is evil. So let's go destroy it, burn this church to the ground, without any distinction of, well, there's pedophiles in the public school. Why don't you burn the public school to the ground? Or things of
That
that sort.
right, and that's certainly not a random set of events, Brother Martin. I mean, you're not seeing. It's not a coincidence that from coast to coast, from north to south, in these United States, you've seen vandalism just this past week against Roman Catholic statues and churches.
No, I mean we've seen them also in France. That's gone very underreported. I mean, when Notre Dame was burning down, we saw the news that actually this happens like weekly over in France, but nobody ever talks about it. So not only is there the persecution, the actual tearing down of the material objects, the churches, the statues, but then there's also the silence of the media of choosing not to cover this sort of vandalism. So now, I mean, in the United States, we're a little bit, I guess, less secular here still than they are over in Europe, and so we see the reports, but it's also, I mean, it's largely intimidation. I mean, still, for the most part, yeah, Christians aren't being killed, but it is changing how we evangelize. The fact that we don't want to talk about our faith openly. We don't want to share our opinions with other people because we don't want the backlash. I mean, I get texts from my friends and from my family. It's like, Brother Martin, are you wearing your cassock out in public? Maybe you should be more prudent and wear something else so you don't be as obvious or whatever. It's like, I never wore this for protection or for comfort, especially when it's hot. But
It does not look comfortable, Brother Martin.
I mean, it's all black, but it's slimming. It's black, right? So, but
But you can like because it's all black, you can spill wine on it and stuff, and people can't tell.
exactly,
So that's
exactly. But yeah, I know it's been coming. It's been coming. I guess we've not really been aware of the signs, but it's we wake up now or pay the consequences. So.
Well, it seems like, Steve, every parish needs to have an action plan, and to the extent that they don't, they're making themselves a soft target, and the escalation will continue. It seems.
Yeah, I was actually shocked that video I did on podcast I did on protecting the churches were actually allowed up on YouTube. And then 20,000 or 30,000 people watched it about it, getting a plan of action, figuring out a idea, seeing who's involved and who needs to be involved and practice and executing, etc. I mean, but you got the state going after the church. I mean, Archdiocese of San Francisco had a cease and desist letter by, I think, the city of San Francisco, and they had 24 hours to respond to it, basically. And there's other cities going after the churches, and then they're basically blaming, the media is going to blame regular people for the increase of cases. Well, if it weren't for these people going outside and living, wouldn't have these increase of cases. And why would we go to these churches where you can get sick? And then, well, that has to be the reason why these increase of cases. Then you get these haters up there, like the one north of where I'm at in Boone, that go and steal the tabernacle because that parish up there was public enemy number one in the media for being open.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, coronavirus only spreads inside churches. It does not spread when roving bands of lunatics are protesting George Floyd's death. Okay, so that's story number one. Story number two this week, the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. Constantinople has a different name on the maps that I'm looking at, the modern maps, Ryan, but have we permanently lost this Catholic site?
At the present, it would look that way. Actually, interesting tidbit in the name. So the name Istanbul comes actually from a corruption of a medieval Greek phrase, which basically means that way to the city. So if you're in the environs, and you wanted to get to Constantinople, there's only one city. So you just simply say Hostampoli, which way to the city. And Hostampoli corrupts into Istanbul and just comes into common speak, and it becomes Stambul in Istanbul eventually. So it's not actually a Turkish word, an active renaming. That was actually more or less just the evolution of one of the alternative names for the city. So historically, but nevertheless, the Turks used to want to call it Constantinople because they really wanted to build up the Roman heritage, the imperial heritage, the kind of their connection to the classical world on that side. In a lot of Ottomans, things actually come from Roman times and Eastern Roman canon legislation, whatnot. They actually work it into their imperial government, right? So that's just one little historical tidbit about Turkey. So the Hagia Sophia, and you should probably say it with a G because the Greeks are far more, especially online, irritable than the Francophones are French pronunciation because they know nobody gets it right. So whereas the Greeks are like, yeah, you will get it right. But Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom, was turned into a mosque in 1453 when Constantinople fell. Almost inverted that, and it remained so until 1935. Okay, so 1935 is when they turn it into a museum. The whole point of that was secular Turkey, because you have World War I, Ottomans are defeated, Greeks occupy a good portion of West Turkey, and so the secular Turks movement arises with its leader, Kemal Mustafa, also known later as Ataturk, which means father of the Turks. So he defeats the Greeks, reclaims most of Turkey, and creates a secular. He uses his clout from doing that to create a secular Turkey, basically saying we're going to be European now. No more Arabic language alphabet. Now we're going to use the Latin alphabet for our language. We're going to, have Western dress and customs. A whole bunch of things he wanted to modernize and secularize, right? And so that was the legacy that took the Hagia Sophia. And already, as it was, they found, all kinds of beautiful icons and iconography in there that even the Turks themselves couldn't bring themselves to destroy in 1453. So they just whitewashed it or plastered it over. And now, in the 1920s, like during some restoration work, they had, or actually earlier than that, 1912, I think, they found these beautiful icons. They said, "Oh," and the Sultan looked at them and said, "Wow, these are marvelous, but you must cover them up because the sheiks will make me destroy them." And so they got plastered over. And then, so in 1934, when the decision was made to turn it into a museum, they closed it down. And then they actually worked uncovering all the, for quite some time, uncovering all the icons, and then reopened it as a museum. So, it being such, it was the biggest tourist spot in Turkey in 2013 and in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. The one sole biggest tourist destination altogether. And it is probably one of the biggest attractions to Turkey, especially for anyone in Europe or in the US, period, of all tourist attractions. So that's the one thing, that's one of their main things. But so that's why even in Turkey, this decision is really controversial to turn it back into a mosque because of that. And that's the last gasp of the Kemalists, that is the secularists in Turkey, are kind of screaming bloody murder. But
Yeah.
They're on their way out in Turkey.
Yes. Yes. Turkey, for those who don't know, who are watching, the Islamization of Turkey, the re-Islamization of Turkey, has been underway for the last 10 years, and it's nearly complete. Steve, your brother's a priest. You know a lot of priests. Can you tell me, in which class do they teach all of the bishops and priests to use the same language? I am deeply pained at the loss of the Hagia Sophia. I mean, what is that, like an elective course, or is that required speech training?
I don't get any MP3s on that one.
No, but I mean the reaction to church leaders is it's uniform. They're all deeply pained and deeply troubled. Is anyone going to do anything about it? I mean,
No, I
no.
mean, it's cumin. Well, you know how it is. I mean, when I was in Denver, I was doing those evangelization things at the street team, St. Paul street team, at these festivals. I had the Muslims right to my right, literally with 20 to 30 deep, two troughs of Qurans. And then you got little old me. Even though I had the Lepanto flag flying over, they had no clue what that was, which was a funny story for another time. I did get a Polaroid with them, which was awesome. They had no idea. But I asked the diocese, "Hey, well, you want to help out? Give me a trough of Bibles I can give out to combat these guys." But Catholic churches there were letting these guys into St. Dominic's, St. Catherine, etc., to teach the Catholics what Islam is. Just a whole lot of tequila getting shoved up everyone's what. And no one said a thing about it.
That's why it's called false ecumenism, right? I don't want to put you on the spot, Ryan. We didn't talk about this beforehand, but isn't it true that the Greek for ecumenism is roughly like within the household, within the house?
Probably something akin to that. I haven't looked into the etymology, so I don't want to wax poetic about that.
The Father Hess video I recently watched he was talking about that's truly what it means. So the meaning of ecumenism is to do house cleaning. So an ecumenical council, for example, is keeping it in the house, cleaning the house. So we had this marvelous, incredible thing at the last council, if it was a council, where we had this privilege of having KGB agents and Protestants and Jews inside the household. Now the word ecumenism has been co-opted, therefore, to mean that we sacrifice all of our principles and try to share in everybody else's false religions, rather than the actual meaning of the word, which is to get our own house in order. Brother Martin, ecumenism gone wild. What are you hearing about the Hagia Sophia? And do you think that we'll ever be Christian again?
Well, first of all, I think a lot of ecumenical officers, I used to live with an ecumenical officer that worked for the Archdiocese, but he also made the distinction between ecumenism and interfaith events. Ecumenism was something that the church refers to even within Protestantism. you go to a Protestant event, technically for them that's ecumenical. But when it comes to Islam or Judaism, it's technically interfaith.
Mm.
But as far as the Hagia Sophia, I mean, it depends on the country of Turkey. Unless somehow we reconquer Turkey, I don't know or I mean, evangelize Turkey. We could ever really force Turkey to turn it back into a museum. I guess some sort of international group like the UN or even the European Union, because I guess Turkey wanted to be a part of the European Union or is.
Well, you heard it here first. Brother Martin calling for a new crusade.
Yeah.
Okay. That's what I
I won't
heard.
deny it.
And going,
All right, third up today.
And Mike, going
sorry.
back to what you were saying before about, with priests today, I mean, if you read Solange Hertz's Star Spangled Heresy, you'll see that it goes back to the beginning of the founding of this land. Bishop England and Diocese in Charleston, their first bishop, he's preaching at Protestant churches about just, great to be where you're at right there. And it was,
Oh yeah,
you
that's
could
true.
read that
Ireland did not want to make any waves.
1980, and it was 1780, 1790.
Yep, precisely. The Americanism runs deep. Okay, third up, church closures 2.0. Is this okay? We know that in terms of like trends and fashions and the novelties of the day, they tend to start on either the left coast or the other left coast and work their way inward towards the center of the country. Is this a new emerging trend out in California now, enveloping Arizona, where churches they've normalized it now, haven't they, Steve? They've made it absolutely normal that okay, you can have mass, now you can't. Now you can, now you can't. And right now, you can only have tent revivals in California. You can be outside in a tent. You can do an amen tent revival.
Yeah, I mean, where Ryan's at, his priest did a little sermon on what the government in San Francisco was issuing to the archdiocese to shut down, cease and desist letter. And Tucson, Arizona, they're shutting down again just by the scare. Some of these bishops are terrified beyond belief, like in Denver and Tucson, but there's other bishops like probably Corleone who isn't terrified about everything, but is getting the force of the government to shut down. The De Blasio, New York, is threatening to close churches permanently. Goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning about how much we're going to take. Where do we draw a line? Where we got statues getting defaced and crumpled, and we got dioceses being told by the state how you're going to run things, and then we got dioceses doing it to ourselves, like where I'm at.
Right. But I guess the question of the day, gentlemen, is, it seems like anything that is proposed by the left becomes de facto law just the following day. And so to spot the emerging trends of what's on the horizon and to be able to predict what will be normalized, what will be expected of you. So with the mask, first it was proposed that you wear the mask and out of courtesy to others. Now it's ruthlessly enforced, and at a certain point, you'll be canceled for not wearing the mask. The church closures, I think, fall into that same category where it is proposed that we just routinely shut down the Catholic Church, and maybe it'll be a seasonal thing. Does anybody disagree that the churches will be closed this winter when COVID 1984 comes back, especially as we approach the November 3rd election?
No, because it'll be live streamed.
Well, maybe, I don't know. More and more priests are saying the traditional mass when they have nobody looking over their shoulder and no Karens in their congregation to call up the bishop. Actually, I know a bunch of diocesan priests, all they did was celebrate the traditional Latin mass, not the ordinary form. And so now for them, there's going to be a lot of soul searching, because every priest I've known that's done that, where they exclusively say the traditional mass, as soon as they have to go back to the ordinary form, something's not right. I don't know what it is, and they just don't want to have anything to do with it. And so there's that could be something that goes on. Maybe not. You never know. But that's going to create some consternation there. I know in Boise, a bunch of priests were celebrating mass ad orientem because they didn't have any Karens to call the bishops. They were just doing it, and that the only thing we heard from the bishop during the entire medical martial law from our governor was not anything of Catholics keeping solace, making spiritual communion, no televised things, nothing on YouTube, nothing on Not even a letter sent to your door. No, no, no. But when he heard that, he had put a big thing fulminating against Ad Orientem and tell us about how Vatican II wonderfully decreed that we have to face the people now, even though he couldn't cite any place Vatican II actually said that. Because like
Yes, Bishop
there's an
Christensen
analogy,
is a
analogy
real
here.
gem. He's a real gem to the American Catholic Church. Just in terms of fantastic, amazing, incredible pastoral guidance that has been passed down during COVID 1984 in a church bulletin that I spotted in Los Angeles last week. The Archbishop of LA put out this very important and urgent message to the faithful. Make sure during this time of lockdown, this period of 17 weeks in which you can only have church revivals outside in outdoor tents, make sure that when you arrange play dates with your children, that they're not elongated play dates with the children, because the children could have friend fatigue. They might be fatigued by hanging out with the one friend that they're allowed to not social distance with for too long. Thank you, Archbishop Gomez. Thank you for that important announcement. And thank you to all the priests who dutifully carried that incredibly important message. Church closure. This is what the California Church is. This is the state of the California Church, ladies and gentlemen.
We're just getting gaslighted from literally every angle. I mean, in Ireland, they're coming up with reports of you can only be 90 minutes in a pub before you have to leave. In South Carolina, they're closing down restaurants and bars at 11. In North Carolina, they want to close down at 10 because apparently the further north you go, the more COVID turns into a smart bug, and you got it.
By the time you get to Virginia and New York, it's like senior hour.
Canada, Maine are hosed. It's like 5 p.m. closed down.
There's a diocese in Germany, which includes the major city of Stuttgart, Germany, where they are now proposing that they shut down. They have 1,000 parishes. They now want to consolidate into 40 parishes.
Wow.
They want to go from 1,000 parishes to 40. That's a 95+% reduction in real estate, and they want to create these mega parishes, right, where they have 6, 8, 10, 12 priests in these mega parishes, and just sort of have the church retreat and collapse inward. This is happening in southwestern Germany. I mean, it's a global phenomenon.
Well, it fits the pattern of the Congregation of Religious in Rome, which takes the view that's to say, well, if your religious order is not dying, then there's a problem here, right? I mean, just look at the basis of their interventions and where they get involved and what orders they go after. It's usually only the growing orders that are under their purview. And in any order that's dying, that's great. They give all sorts of praise to them. So it's the same idea, it seems like, for the Germans, German intellectual bishops that want this synodal path. The thing is going to be so wonderful to basically, completely self-destruct any vestige of Catholicism that might even still be left in Germany today. And so, a little surprise when people aren't going anymore. You tax them, and I mean, granted, half of that's an iniquitous government situation that was placed on by Bismarck, but they have it where you have to pay this tax, right? This church tax. And in order to be Catholic, and then the bishops who live in these lavish lives, doing practically nothing for the faithful, no preaching. No, if you're a serious Catholic in Germany, you're at that spot like, can I get out of this? I can still be Catholic and not pay my church tax, right? And I was like, well, you won't get ecclesiastical burial, and you won't be able to get, you might not be able to get last rites because you won't be identified as Catholic in the hospital. I take my chances. I mean, it's hard for German Catholics that are really serious about the faith right now because of that.
Yeah, it sure is. Which leads us into our fourth story, Steve. The mask mania has really accelerated. I think we reported last week or 2 weeks ago that certain municipalities around the country are now fining you up to $10,000, even stiffer fines in certain parts of the country if you're not wearing a mask. Again, this goes with that philosophy of whatever the left proposes to do in the future then becomes de facto law the very next day and ruthlessly enforced. But if you commit the grave sin of heresy, Steve, you could be carted off to some no-name facility in Arkansas. Like, what's going on with that?
Yeah, I mean, you got Colorado just put out a mask mandate for the entire state. Michigan governor. This is Michigan, right? Yeah, the weird one. She's out there putting was a 200, 250, or $500 fine and closure of businesses if they get caught if you don't wear it. Inglewood, Colorado is threatening a year in prison if you're caught without it. I know North Carolina's got a state mandate. The county I'm in has basically told him to go pound sand, and no cop is enforcing it here. We live in the sticks, so we don't think too kind highly of those people that do that stuff. But South Carolina is county by county. Georgia, Kemp, the governor, is suing Atlanta for their mandate. You talk about just Twilight Zone stuff going on. And then if you haven't watched Brian Swan's video on the mask, he really does a great job just using recent sources and studies that talk about how the cloth one actually hurts the person. Doesn't do anything for protection, actually hurts the person. Now, the N95 and the ventilator are two different things that people are talking about. They don't even understand, one, what they are, and one, how to wear it and all this. They're fumbling in it and touching it, and lipstick and makeup services have gone down the tubes because people are used to put makeup on. Now it's on their mask, so why bother do that anymore? We're living in Looneyville. But yes, Arkansas or Arkansas. I don't know if anybody says Arkansas, but there was a joke once of a bartender saying, "How come Arkansas isn't mentioned Arkansas?" I'm not making that up. That came from a human being. Arkansas National Guard transporting COVID-19 patients to isolation facility. And this comes from Fox 13 in Memphis. So if anybody thinks
isolation facility,
yeah,
that just sounds menacing.
Governor Asia Hutchinson ordered 14 medics from the Army National Guard to transport positive COVID-19 patients from locations around the state to an isolation facility near the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock, a release stated.
Okay, so these are test positive. You test positive in Arkansas, and you go to an isolation camp.
Basically, the National Guard will come and get you and move you to this camp. It doesn't say anything else on there. Just says there are people working 24-hour shifts, but things that make you go,
According to the article, it's supposed to be for people whose family situation doesn't allow them to shelter in place, so that because they're unable to isolate at home due to family considerations, according to the press release. And so, but this is an interesting thing, and I've said this from the beginning, and I've been very vehemently against any cooperation with contact tracers. I've encouraged other people to do so, and I get pushback from people. Oh, that's just awful. That's like civilly disobedient. Like, you want to keep this pandemic going. It's like, no, I want to keep the Stasi and the Gestapo out of my house. Because that's ultimately what it becomes in this kind of environment. All things being equal, city health authorities being able to at least notify you you've been around someone. If you've got the Black Death, especially if you have bring out your dead levels of pandemic in society.
bring out your dead.
Sure. But this virus has petered out. It's done. All right. You look at the death rate and you look at the case rate, because we have all this data that's there's no disambiguation for the data. Are these cases of people who are infected with COVID-19? Because in virology, again, if you go into virology, epidemiology, all these studies, and you read what they say, an infection is when you are sick and showing symptoms. Who the heck ever heard of testing for the flu? For all these different things, you only test when you have symptoms of an infection. So and the infection is
and the test, Ryan, the test that they administer. Okay, if a droplet of your spittle will level a village, okay, which is what they want us to believe. Why do they have to take a Q-tip, shove it into your sinus cavity, go all the way to the base of your skull, all the way to the back of your head, and swab there to find out if you actually have it?
Not to mention, that could very well be the thing giving you COVID-19 test positive. I mean, and the thing is that testing positive, again, the data is not disambiguated, so that we don't know one who's testing positive that will never ever show symptoms and be perfectly fine. Those who actually did come down with an infection for whom it was very mild. Those whom tested positive while they were in the hospital for some kind of routine thing that was banned during medical martial law, which they're now trying to catch up on. And so now they are a COVID hospitalization, even though they may never develop symptoms whatsoever and be discharged. And again, people who are hospitalized and put in the ICU on account of COVID, we're not getting any distinctions of these numbers. We're just getting, oh, more testing. We've got to ramp up that testing. And then guess what? And I refuse to share this story online until I verified it. You see these things, people that were, oh, why I skipped out on my test and it came back positive, or I got a positive negative on the same day, and I got all these things, right? So I know someone now personally who had another doctor's appointment, realized it, missed it, so he skipped out on the COVID testing, went to the doctor's appointment, didn't get tested at the doctor's appointment. So the COVID test at the facility they have set up, they sent it in and came back positive. And then he had to call and they had to inform the Panhandle Health and say, well, I didn't get tested, so I don't know what test you're looking at, but it's not mine. And like, oh, and they look and oh, sorry about the mistake. Caught red-handed.
Right.
And you see that, and I know 3 people now, same thing, where they didn't go for whatever reason, and were told they tested positive. And then, of course, in Florida, 90% false rate of reportage of positive tests. They're reporting like 90% of what they were reporting was false.
Yeah, that's right, Brother Martin. You're in Florida right now. I know that's not where you normally hang your hat, but you're temporarily in Florida. You've got to be seeing this stuff. At what point did we shift over from using the fatality rate as a basis of making public policy decisions to just using the confirmed cases? I mean, you're like at the epicenter at this point. Are you afraid? Are you sheltering in place, Brother Martin?
Not at all. I mean, actually, I live with a sick priest, and he can't. I forbid him from going out to into the public, all that kind of stuff, because his lungs are sick. If he gets it, he's in bad shape. So I do all the shopping, all that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm doing here in Florida, is taking care of a sick priest. But yeah, there's yellow signs on every single building of the city mandate saying you have to wear a mask. It's a city mandate, and so you can't go into the store without it. There's security guards at the front of every store. But I mean, diners are open. Every other booth, you're able to be seated, all that kind of stuff. But at the beginning, also, I mean, first it was Italy that was getting plummeted, and we all saw pictures of caskets, lined up in rooms of hundreds of people. I haven't seen a news report from Europe in quite a while in regards to the deaths. Again, the switching over to cases only. But also, we were also afraid of our ability to ICU units in hospitals. We also don't see the number of cases compared to the number of ICU units we have to treat these cases. We were afraid that hospitals would be overwhelmed. The medical service would be overwhelmed. There's other doctors.
3 months ago, if you were confined to a ventilator, that was likely to be a death sentence. Now, if you're on a ventilator, chances are the next week you're walking home.
Exactly. And then other doctors are getting upset too, because hospitals, I mean, the medical industry is a for-profit industry. They're putting a lot of their money in COVID cases because they get government money for each COVID case. And so doctors that do other things aren't able to see their patients, sometimes even because a lot of the receptionists are being transferred over to COVID to help with the COVID stuff. And so other doctors that work with trauma, all that kind of stuff, they're not able to see their patients because there's no one to answer the phones. And so now they're going through a problem as well.
What about the ecclesiastical situation in Florida, Brother Martin? Have you seen masses closed or dioceses in Florida start to clamp down? Are they doing tent revivals like in California?
Not yet. Not yet. It's still the 10% capacity. There's those wedding ribbons on every pew kind of thing, so that you can mark off the pews that you can't sit in. They're using those reconciliation rooms to keep your 6 feet distance for confessions and stuff. So sacraments are still going on. Some priests refuse to go into hospitals to anoint people, so that causes a problem.
Wow, I would hate to have that on my soul. I would hate to be an ordained priest of God who refuses to go into a hospital to give the last rites to a soul about to enter his particular judgment. I don't want that on my soul.
Quick story. I heard one story here. Down here in Florida, there's an illicit group called the Old Roman Catholic Seer of Care Glow. But I mean, they're validly ordained, all that kind of stuff. They go to hospitals still. They anoint people that are dying. But priests here, actually, they said, if you receive you know, viaticum from one of these guys, don't even bother coming back to our church. You know, Nova's Order Priest saying this. You know, if you receive the last
What
rites
happened to
from the Mercy
Mercy?
group, do not even come back. And so these guys now are growing because they're braving it, and they're going into the hospitals and, you know, risking themselves and anointing people. So that's another dilemma, I guess, that the Novus Ordo Church is going to have on the other side of this dilemma is, you know, the flock are going to follow the people that, you know, they're going to follow the Good Shepherd. They're going to follow whoever was willing to lay down their life for their sheep. And so
Wow.
I mean, like the Didache said, you'll distinguish a good shepherd from a false shepherd by their behavior. And so here you go.
Ryan brought up a couple of things of true false positives. There's two guys for the Texas Rangers, or at least one guy, and his another agent with the same agent, another player, tests positive one day, tests negative the next day, tests positive the next day, tests negative the next day. And they don't know what to do.
Science.
Did you see
I believe in
Did you see in Australia where they shut down 9 housing units?
Yes.
And there's a
Locked them
video of a
in.
guy trying to get outside. All he wants to do is go outside. And there's 5 people in there, the military there won't let him outside the building.
Yeah, that exact thing has been happening for months in continental Europe as well. My wife's in close contact with some of her friends in Spain, and they've been holed up in their apartment building. They have men with automatic weapons standing guard to make sure
Wow.
that the residents of these high capacity multifamily units are not able to go outside. I mean, it's rather scary, and they've been doing that since March and April. I mean, this is something that's not reported, and it's so we think it's bad here already with the mask mania. It hasn't even gotten bad yet.
Here's a couple churchy things. You know, brother brought up the confessionals. You notice that the old school confessionals, you have no problem with those, but it's the closet ones. Those are the issues. You go back to the box where you got the little curtain in there, not a problem at all. And then, you know, every church has a sign saying masks are allowed. CDC requires masks. How many of those churches you think have a sign saying modesty clothing must be enforced inside the church?
Now we know that Bishop's going to force a dress code. So there you go.
Right.
Yes, the only dress code that is ruthlessly enforced is covering your face, but you don't have to cover the rest of your body, just your face.
Yeah, how many sermons from regular priests about wearing a mask, but compare that to putting a dress on, wearing a tie, you know, dressing nice, dressing Catholic, not being
or just covering your body, just covering your skin. All right, we got to get to our fifth story because we have a lot of good news stories that follow the fifth story. This is all sad stuff. This is all weird. Fifth story, Bishop Barron. Okay. Vatican II is being relitigated as we speak. It is happening live. Every single talking head on YouTube and Facebook and whatever social media is out there. The discussion is broken open, and I think all the bishops, especially Bishop Barron, who is the penultimate Vatican II cheerleader, they've all received the same memo. And it's a rush to get out there and defend Vatican II. And the reason why I think that's broken open as well, and just one little tactical battle in which this is being fought. You could go watch it. Just do a search for Vatican II. You can see everybody's talking about it. But the death penalty, Ryan, the death penalty, which is a longstanding piece of moral teaching, it was established in Genesis. That now is being changed, and if you can get away with changing this, then anything is up for change, right? Anything is debatable at this point.
Essentially, yes. If you get down to it, if you can really now, how's it really been changed? Here's an interesting thing. So you have the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is considered an authoritative organ of teaching. It's not magisterial in as much as it's in the category of teaching identified by Vatican I, right? But in a catechism, the authority of the things taught in a catechism depends upon their source, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when obviously we have the Immaculate Conception, the source is Pius IX's solemn judgment on the matter, which is infallible. or again to the teaching of the Chalcedonian definition of Christ as one divine person with two human natures. That rests upon an ecumenical council. The death penalty, the current teaching that is in the present edition rests upon a personal initiative of Pope Francis to put something in there. There's no actual formal teaching as much as that's binding in faith and morals coming from at least the ordinary universal magisterium, at the least, which would at least require an obsequium religiosum. We don't even have that. Just Francis said, you know what, change that. And that has changed. Well, I'm sorry, the Catechism is not the magisterium. Okay, it's a mix of disciplinary and doctrinal teachings that are, basically, had gained their authority from their source. So, but if they can, eventually, if they can persist in formally teaching this, and then eventually it becomes, and it really does bring in a contradiction that has to be dealt with in theology, and I'm not a theologian, so I'll let the theologians work out how you'd even approach that. Well, how can you have Scripture and the fathers interpreting Scripture and magisterial teachings of the Church affirm the right of the state to carry out the death penalties? Where John Paul II was at made sense. He said, the state can, but it shouldn't. Right, and I don't necessarily agree with that, but I get the thrust of it. It's not affecting anything in doctrine. He's really just talking about prudence. But now Francis has kind of developed this whole new notion of the human person that was unknown for the last 2,000 years. That suddenly requires you,
Yes.
You can't, and then he's against life in prison too. So what is a society with wayward and fractious individuals supposed to do when you can't kill malefactors?
You can't isolate them, and you can't kill them. Yeah, and I think that this misunderstanding, Ryan, with respect to, if the Pope says it, then it's law. That has perhaps been a misunderstanding since 1870, since the closing of Vatican I, and an absolute misunderstanding of the dogma of papal infallibility. He's only infallible sometimes, rarely, and it doesn't even seem like Pope Francis invokes that particular privilege of his office very often, if ever. But the Pope is not the master of tradition. He is subject to tradition. So he has no right or authority to change that which is magisterially taught in all times, right?
That's what Vatican I says, that the deposit of faith was not entrusted to Peter and his successors so that they could make new doctrine, but so they would faithfully pass on the deposit that they received. And that notion has been completely. There's another line in Vatican I, which I think is again completely denied today by the modernists, or I guess basically anybody at this point, where it says that a doctrine may not. You can't make a new doctrine in the name of a new and better understanding of an old doctrine. Rather, doctrines have to be understood in the sense in which the Church once declared them. And so what they've done is to confuse the legitimate development of doctrine, where truths connected to revelation are then discovered and unfolded and explained and explicated. And then you have various areas of secondary infallibility and things and further teaching that follows from the previous one, to things that are completely brand new and have no basis in the tradition on the basis of a new understanding. And the death penalty, to me, would seem to fit the very bill of this thing condemned in Vatican I.
Yeah. So, and that's exactly why this is tied into the larger discussion, Steve, about how Vatican II has just. Bishop Barron is rallying to the defense of Vatican II because the very specific criticisms of Vatican II in 5 of the documents are the novelties proposed by the council, which are not in teaching with historical church norms, and now everybody's talking about it, and so I think that this death penalty is just one issue that is broken open this debate, and everyone wants to relitigate it now.
I just want to put out a disclosure when he says everyone. I didn't get included in the everyone.
We're seeing it. Everyone is now on, online talking about it. I think Taylor did a show yesterday about Vatican II and whether or not it's possible for a council to contain errors, and if that means that it's not a council or not, and comparing and contrasting both the Bishop Schneider approach and the Archbishop Vigano approach. Very interesting stuff. But why is this happening this week, though? That's what I think is so newsworthy of why all of this is suddenly fresh. It's a fresh wound.
Because we're putting together a big commercial to have everyone buy On the Council by Bellarmine that was translated by Media Express.
Thanks for the pitch. I should have thought of that. It comes back to Vigano. In Vigano's letter, or one of his letters or statements, I don't know, the latest Vigano drop, I can't keep track of when he said what or where he said, but it was fairly recently where he was saying that Vatican II just needs to be forgotten. And you had, I think I saw like Bishop Tobin going after it, I saw a few other people say, no. I mean, well, look, the guy was, his whole career was built on supporting Vatican II. Why did it take him 55 years to say this? Yeah. If it's so bad, And so, I don't know. My policy is pretty much ignore Vatican II. I just don't care. I'm not a theologian, and even the ones who are, you can't solve that issue of the various problems and ambiguities in Vatican II yourself. Ultimately, it's going to be an act of the magisterium and the church to reconcile these things, or whatever else the church will end up doing with Vatican II, or however that future pope and the Holy Spirit guides the church to do that. So who the heck am I that I'm going to explain? How am I going to reconcile Vatican II with tradition? So now I'm not saying that nobody should be talking about it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that Taylor shouldn't be doing shows on it or Michael Matt shouldn't be running stuff on it. Of course they can. And that's perfectly fine for those with the knowledge, and because somebody needs to do it. But I think the run-of-the-mill average Catholic needs to worry a lot more about a spiritual life and embracing the tradition of the church. And as Gregory the Great said to somebody who's having problems with Constantinople too, just ignore it. Just leave it off the list of councils. Don't worry about it, and move on because we're not unless you're violating some kind of law or something. Although on the other hand, Second Constantinople also condemned the view that everyone will be saved. Namely, it condemns the views that von Balthasar and therefore Bishop Barron espoused. So that's another thing.
Right. Dare we hope. Dare we hope. Brother Martin, it seems like anecdotally, and you're much more active on the social medias than I am, but anecdotally to me anyway, and I just want to get your quick reaction to this. It seems to me like the crowd, the put lipstick on a pig crowd, the Reform of the Reform folks, in other words, the Bishop Schneider approach of let's just do some line item vetoes and let's clean up Vatican II and let's redline Lumen Gentium and all of the that crowd seems to be dwindling these days, whereas the Archbishop Vigano approach, which it sounds like is the Ryan Grant approach of who cares, ignore it, it'll be wiped out anyway, it's probably not even a valid count, like that it seems like that crowd is growing. Would you say that that's what you're seeing as well, just at least with the people who express their opinions online about this thing?
I think there's a lot of people in both camps. It's just a different approach to the same effect, meaning that Vatican II really is going to have to become irrelevant eventually. How that's going to happen, I'm not necessarily sure. To be forgotten. I mean, Rome will never admit that it made a mistake. Rome will never say this was an infallible council, and then all of a sudden turn around and say this is just a pastoral council. You don't need to. It'll never. That'll never happen. However, the dwindling down, people just wanting reverend novus ordos, all that kind of stuff, and eventually seeing that the standard for reverence is the traditional Latin Mass. So just why not have the traditional Latin Mass? I mean, that was always one of the questions: is why not just have the traditional Latin Mass in English? Why not just that was what the 1965 missal was. I have one. It has the readings in English and has the post communion and the offertory prayers in English, but has everything else in Latin. That was one option that just got kind of thrown out the window whenever Bonini in the Concilium, rewrote the Mass. What comes to mind is the story of Abby Johnson. I mean, recently she experienced the traditional Latin Mass. She went, and then she posts on Twitter later on how she was thinking about the beauty later on that week, and she just burst into tears, thinking about, how beautiful it was and why we gave this up and how it could happen. Also, what comes to mind was the conversation I had with my late grandmother a couple of years ago. I asked, Grandma, what happened? What was it like? And she only responded, she was like, everything changed and we went along with it, but nobody even asked. Nobody was asking for clown masses. Nobody was asking for guitars at masses. Nobody was asking, to better understand having the vernacular. Everybody had their hand missiles. I happened to run into someone on the 4th of July when the church was closed because it was the 4th of July. For some reason, I guess that cancels mass. It was an older guy, and he was talking to me about it. And he was like, if you couldn't understand the mass back then, all you had to do is take your eyes from the left side of your missile and move them over to the right side of the missile. If you couldn't even understand mass, I'm not even sure you could commit a mortal sin. That's all it took. Um,
Right.
But I think
Right.
a lot of people are beginning to see first through the reverence, through the love the priest shows in the mass by caring for it, by loving it, and by following the rubrics. It says something. The priest communicates to the faithful something like, this is the most important thing in life. This is what I've given up my life for. And it's that heart, I think, that love that really draws people, and not so much, I don't know, robotic movements or whatever. People, oh yes, we need robotic. No, it's the love that's communicated by those things. So the form ultimately it's a means to an end. The end ultimately is love of God. But obviously we want the best means to do that. And I think when people experience the traditional Latin Mass for themselves, why reform or the reform? Why?
Great points, Brother Martin. And we'll continue to track this story. We've deliberately sidestepped relitigating it here. It's not for us to do, as you so aptly said, Ryan. It's just that it's interesting that this week it's broken wide open and everyone's talking about it. I think at this point, first of all, Ryan, but if you're watching this video right now, you need to make sure that you catch the debate that Ryan is preparing for tonight. Ryan is taking on Tim Gordon, and they are talking. What are you talking about anyway?
Um, Basically going to be critiquing his view that the founding of America is inherently Catholic, that all the framers and founders were employing Catholic ideas and Catholic thought, the legend that Jefferson was influenced by Bellarmine and so many things. And I do want to put the caveat out that I like Tim Gordon. Actually, I think he's a good guy, and so it's um, even though the meaning of Catholics framing it as this big debate, this one versus this one, like we're going to duke it out. Actually, he probably knocked me out. It's pretty buff, and I'm fat, and I smoke and drink. So it's more of a discussion on that point, basically on the themes in his book, Catholic Republic and whatnot.
Yeah, I'm looking at
Very
the
good.
Vegas odds. It's got Ryan at 5-2.
I think it'll be pretty lopsided. Okay, good news stories. It's time for good news stories today. Who has a good news story?
I saved some money by switching to Geico.
Congratulations, Steve. Well done. Well done.
We had
Okay,
two
I'll start with
pontifical
one.
masses. We had a pontifical solemn high in Charlotte. The bishop did the old school, old right confirmation last week.
Nice.
Very
Which bishop is
nice.
that?
Very nice.
Jugas.
Bishop Julius, Bishop Strickland, Tyler,
Also.
Texas, did the same.
Mm-hmm.
Pontifical High Mass. We'll show you a video of that as well. I have one that's pretty obscure, but and I should have brought this up as good news 2 weeks ago when it actually happened. But a man named Trey Traynor, you will never know his name because this is just not the kind of national breaking news. He was named by President Trump to the Federal Election Commission. He's an attorney out of Austin, Texas. I used to go to Mass with him, Latin Mass with him. And he and his many children have moved to Washington, D.C., and where he has been appointed the chairman of the Federal Election Commission. So we have another Latin Masser inside the administration in high-level federal government. And I'm pretty sure he's going to make sure we don't have mail-in ballots. Federal Election Commission, Trey Traynor. So congratulations to him and his wife for the many sacrifices it's taken them to get this appointment and Senate confirmation.
Yes.
So since that just happened, he's not one of those serious Catholics that was quoted to attack Taylor Marshall and Vigano.
Yeah.
you remember that story.
No, I missed that story. No.
There was a CNA article which was like, I was like, this is what I expect for the New York Times.
Yeah, it was a hit piece.
And yeah, total hit piece. And
right.
It's just how you get two unnamed sources say, well, serious Catholics don't take these guys seriously. And then and a friend of mine, and he's a good guy and he works for CNA, but he was trying to defend that piece, and I just said, well, how is this not the yellowest journalism? You didn't even reach out to Taylor Marshall for any kind of comment about it. It's that you're not doing journalism, you're doing opinion at this point. And just state that our opinion is this based on this, and don't pretend like this is a real news story. You're framing reality now as this is reality and this is not, based on very subjective qualifications, frankly.
Advocacy news, indeed. There's a free online Catholic conference happening next weekend, the Soul of the Christian Apostolate, put on by a young man named Kevin Rorty in Denver, Colorado. We'll have a link to it as well. This is it has received the endorsements of Archbishop Cordileone and Bishop Strickland and Bishop Schneider and Bishop Aquila in Denver. So that's happening. Lots of good stuff. I think you are a presenter in that, Steve. Is that right?
Yeah, he asked me to do a little interview, so I just ranted for about 50 minutes.
That's good. So if you want to see Steve's commentary at the Soul of the Christian Apostolate conference, go to souloftheapostolate.com.
I'm sure there's better interviews than mine.
Doubtful. I find that to be improbable.
At least
Brother Martin, Brother Martin, you had a good news story. I don't want that to get lost.
Out in California, one of the missions founded by St. Junipero Serra was elevated to a minor basilica, basically having a little fancy privileges for the canons there that play the office, and a little umbrella, yellow and red umbrella that they get. But basically, in the context of all these statues of St. Junipero Serra being destroyed, beheaded, all that kind of stuff, defaced, Rome steps up and grants this dignity to this mission. So that's kind of saying underneath the table, where Rome stands in the face of all these Marxist groups that are going around defacing all of our stuff. So.
That is a good news story. Paints a larger target on the back of that mission, I suppose. But yeah, good for them. All right, guys, this has been the rundown. Thanks for watching.
Before we run off, let's throw up a couple solutions. Now, we gave a lot of bad news and a couple good news, but we talk about the mask. How you get around that is forget about Walmart and Costco and those guys, and go support your local guy that's giving out some fruit down the street, or your butcher. And guess who's not worrying about the mask are those guys.
That's true. Catholic economics right there. Shop local, think local.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I do even when there
is that the only solution, Steve?
I thought you guys were going to keep going. No, I could go on for 20 minutes about this localism.
No, I do want to. I want to underscore what Ryan said about all this fretting and worrying about Vatican II. It's like kind of like maybe we should all just kind of ignore it and focus on our spiritual life. Mm-hmm. Period. Yeah. End of story.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you're Jocko Willig time, if you're focused on this is the problem, you're focused on that, and you need to get there, you're gonna die. It's basically the whole mindset of the military. You would say that if you were out on mission and you're worried about some little birdie over there, but the guys that are shooting at you over there, it's not going to be a good day for you. So
absolutely,
keep your focus where you're going.
If you're a young man out on a combat patrol and you're worried about some drama at home and your wife and she's sick, or your daughter's having surgery or whatever, and your mind is not focused on your mission, you're compromised. Yeah. So yeah, keep focused on the mission, getting to heaven.
Yeah, read more spiritual books, pray more. Somebody on this panel has a trough full of gold books. They gonna buy them.
Soul of the Apostle is a good book.
Yes.
Soul Apostle, yeah.
There you go. Read it. Mm-hmm.
Read less of the Vatican II blogs and read more of those books.
But subscribe to Sensus Fidelium. do that. If you're watching this show and you have, I think you look at the analytics on your channel, Steve, right? And like half the people who watch the stuff are not subscribers. How is that possible? Hit the button right now. Hit the subscribe button and that little bell so that you get notifications whenever Steve drops a new video. And I would really be honored if you could subscribe to Restoring the Faith as well.
And we're getting shadow banned, so I don't think it's not too far off. I wouldn't be shocked if we get, shut off YouTube by 2021 or something like that.
Well, it will have been good while it lasted, right, Steve?
Oh, we got backup at BitChute, library, whatever, tube. I got a whole list. You click underneath the video, got all kinds of links to where everything else is at. But YouTube is where everybody goes, so it won't be gone if they delete us, but it will just be harder for everyone to find because no one's used to going to other spots.
Indeed. All right, this plane is landing. Thanks for watching. This is The Rundown coming at you every week. Thanks, guys, for doing this. God bless you. Speak soon.